Hi there. Um, in this video, I'm going to go over the meal attendance spreadsheet and how the formulas work for that. Alright, so on the left side of the spreadsheet is the running rows and columns that keep track of the different people that come to the meals. So for column A, which you can select by selecting any of these up here, then it's just going to be the dates of each of the meals. In order to unselect something, you just click away from it. The second column, which is B, keeps track of the numbers of interns and staff that are at each meal. Column C keeps track of the number of volunteers at each meal. And finally, column D keeps track of the number of guests. So the first formula that is used in the sheet is a sum formula. So for instance, for the eth column, second row, the formula for calculating the total numbers of interns, volunteers, and guests for this row is calculated by the sum of B2, which is this cell, to D2, which is this cell. So if you double click on this formula, then you can see that the way that you would input this, if I just go ahead and delete it to show you. So in order to input a formula, you always have to have first an equal sign, then whatever name of the function you're using. In this case, we're adding everything together, so it's going to be the sum of a selection of rows and columns. Then you have to enclose those rows and columns in parentheses in order for the function to know what you're talking about. So then the range that we're going to be using for the sum is from B2, so this would be this cell. Then we want it to go over to the right two cells to D2. So the way that you do that is you put a colon and then D2, or whatever ending cell you have. And then in order for the formula to take effect, you hit enter. And whenever it enters, it just goes down one cell to whatever cell's below it. So the formula for this cell would be from B3 to D3, and so on and so forth for each of the ones down here. Now, a nice trick is if, for instance, I delete the formulas for these rows, and you don't have to write out each formula for each one of these, considering that it's just, going to be instead of D2 or B2 to D2, B3 to D3. Then what you can do is you can take this formula that's already here, and you see this box in the lower right corner. You can select that box and drag it down however many cells you need to, and this will do all the formulas for you, just moving down a row like we need to. And it won't affect the calculations for the total number of meals and all that. Alright, so I think this covers this side of the spreadsheet, where this is mostly just data entry over here and then just one sum formula for each row. It gets a little bit more complicated over on this side. So the way that I have this one set up is that for the total overall, you're going to want to take the sum of the total column. And the way that you would do that is you would basically have the sum formula from E to E. You don't have any numbers with, E2 to E whatever. It's just E to E. And that's just this formula, or this column over here. And you can do the same thing with each of, the number of volunteers. That's just going to be the C column. And the number of interns, that's just going to be the B column. And the number of guests, which is the D column. It gets a little bit more complicated whenever you're calculating the averages, which is what I'll go over next, because you're going to have to calculate the sum, which we find in this cell here, which is G2, and then divide it by the number of meals that we've had. So in order to get the count for the number of meals, I have a cell over here at K2 that keeps track of the number of meals. And because we're counting the number of dates, we can use a formula called the count. So let me show you how that works. So basically, the count formula keeps track of the number of numbers in a column. So for instance, it won't count this date cell because it's not a number. It'll just keep track of the number of actual dates that there are. So to input that, it's going to be the equal sign, then count, then parentheses, and then inside those parentheses, we're going to just do the A columns. That would be A:(A. And this calculates the total number of meals, which right now is 2, as it should be. So then in order to calculate the averages, all we have to do is calculate whatever column we're at. So this would be, the totals, the average for the total number of people at each meal. That would just be total overall, which is G2, divided by K2, which is the total number of meals. And the way that you would put this into the formula is, instead of having an equal sign, then for instance, the sum or the count, it's just going to be equals, then you select whichever cell it is. So for instance, this is going to be G2 for the total overall, then the division sign, then select K2, which is the total number of meals. And it's 16, which is how it should be. So then for each of the average volunteers, it's going to be the same thing. So it's going to be the total number of volunteers divided by the total number of meals. And these columns are just, moving down the line. This middle section here is another data input point, where for every time a volunteer group signs up, I put the date and the group name. So for instance, if it is January 7th and the group name is, let's say, Lambda Chi, then I just record those here. And I'll tell you why in just a little bit whenever I go over the attendance and donation report that I do every month. So for instance, I'm going to delete these. Alright, so now moving down to here, this is basically the same way as the totals that are up above here, but I have a little bit of a change. So instead of calculating the entire column for a running total for the entire year, we want to keep track of a single month. So in order to do that, then we're going to need to keep track from a certain cell down. So for instance, if the January numbers are up here and the February numbers are down here, if you want to keep track of just February, then we need to start at, say, this cell, instead of at the top of the column for the running totals. So the changes to these formulas are just, instead of it being the sum from E:(E), it's going to be the sum from E2 to E. And all that needs to change from month to month is the row number that you're starting with. So for instance, if you wanted to, if February starts on cell 10, then you just change this to E10, and it'll keep track of it. You'll have to change that value for each one of these columns for the totals for volunteers, interns, and guests, as well as the count formula for the number of meals in that time period. So I will change this value back to be correct for January, which starts on 2. And so then this begs the question of, okay, well, for each month, say we want to keep track of the monthly trends. So for January 1, we want to see just how many, total meals we served in January, as opposed to for the whole year. So in order to save these numbers, what I've done is I've created a Google document that keeps track of each one of these values, so that we can just change these formulas and rewrite this over and still have all that data saved in a different place. So we're going to create that Google document now. So I'm going to go up to the New button, and I'm going to select a Google document. Since this document has not already been created, the name for this document is going to be Attendance and Donation Report 2018. And then I'm going to pull from the 2017 document, say the October information, so that we can just copy and paste this and delete the data for January. So if we go up here, change this to 2018, delete that section, and then just delete the values that are in this table, as well as the volunteer groups. And the information in the donation report. And I'm assuming that if you're watching this, you probably know how to use a Word document, which is what this basically is. So then whenever it's the end of the month, then I will come into this document and I will take the numbers that are down here in the monthly column and I will put them in this table here in the cells that they go in. The reason why we keep track of the volunteer groups is so that we can take the names and dates from here and put them in this section, one bullet point for each group. And then I also keep track of the donation information for the given month. So going into the monthly donation sheet, which I'll go over in my next video, and then placing those values here at the end of every month. I think this just about covers it for the attendance spreadsheet, and I hope you enjoy your day.